Yeah. Do you mind if I audio record our conversation?
Oh, sure.
Okay. Thank you. What's your name? You can make the one up if you're concerned about anonymity.
I take my privacy very seriously.
Yeah.
Be Marie.
Okay. Samuel.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah. So you were saying kind of that you don't really hold any for like your beliefs sort of change or mutate over time.
I think it's important to allow them
Uh-huh.
to change. And by doing so, you're broadening your horizons. You're more able to empathize with people. And I think it makes you more open,
Can
less
you?
closed off.
Is it? Do you think it's possible to have firm convictions on stuff and still be able to empathize with people who feel differently than you?
I think it's harder.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've had conversations with people where I'm almost the mediator and I'm listening to one side and I'm listening to the other side. And what I try to do is I try to point out to each other, look, like, you're both feel very strongly for similar reasons in different directions. Can we maybe come back and just agree that your reasons, being so similar, are equally important? Especially when it comes
Do
to
you,
things like, hot topic things like abortion.
right. So do you think that even if it's not, even if you might never actually come to know who is right, is it the case that on at least a significant number of subjects, one thing is right and another thing is not right, or one is at least more right and one is less right? And I not necessarily
I suppose there are certain subjects where I lean on science,
right.
such as, do I believe that COVID-19 is real and potentially dangerous for a lot of individuals? Yes. But do I understand why some people choose to believe that it's no more severe than the flu?
Do you think that beliefs are a choice?
I think that beliefs can be a mix of a choice and a way of coping. I think some things are so big and so hard to wrap our brains around or wrap our emotions around that when something sounds good or calming or reassuring to you, that it's very easy to latch onto that.
Right. And is that part of uh, what keeps you, do you think, from adhering to any one sort of belief system too strongly?
I always believe in the 80%, maybe
80-20
80%,
rule.
yeah, the 80-20
Yeah.
rule where it's like, 80% of the time this is the right response or the right answer, but 20% of the time it's not. And, it can do more harm than good. And I also believe very much, kind of like with the recent presidential inauguration, the message of unity, I feel very strongly about that because if we live in these worlds, with Facebook and our friends and often our families as well, where it's an echo chamber. We all have the same ideas, we all have the same beliefs. If you refuse to hear somebody out who disagrees with you, well, you're not doing anybody in the world any favors.
Mm-hmm.
This idea of like, oh, well, my way is the best for for the greater good,
Right.
versus, well, their way would destroy us.
Yeah. So I think
It's like, come on, can't we just listen to each other and find some commonalities and find some common ground that maybe we do agree on? And perhaps the way we go about it isn't the same, but can we at least say that we agree, that we want the same outcome?
Right. And one of the complaints that I hear about the current call for unity is that it is predicated upon agreeing with us. Like we want unity if you agree with us. And people cite the fact that for 4 years during the Trump presidency, those people who are calling for unity were not calling for unity. They were calling for they were.
Well, and the way I look at it is like, okay, yeah, maybe somebody's completely changed their tune. Well, great. They want to change their tune. Let's run with it. instead of
What do you
holding,
mean?
well, I'm just saying, instead of saying, oh, well, for the last X amount of time, you've said one thing and now you're saying another.
Right.
Yeah, maybe they're just blowing smoke. It's possible.
Mm.
But maybe they have had a change of heart or a change of mind, or they're at least open to it. So why would we shut them out? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Right.
If you've had this constant disagreement with somebody and one day they're like, I think we need to come together and work this out.
Right.
Instead of just jumping to this conclusion that, oh, well, they don't really mean it.
Right. Well, so I no, and I totally hear you. And like, for me, I try to consume news from a variety of perspectives.
Same.
And
it's interesting, isn't it? To see
yes,
how
totally.
the exact same phrase can be taken to completely different directions.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and so I guess getting back to the election, the calls for I think that people on both sides do. There are a percentage of people on both sides who do want unity and understand that unity is. It's a struggle to have unity because you need to be united with people who may not agree with you.
Well, maybe this idea of unity meaning, oh, I have to side with or agree with people I don't. To me, that's not what unity is. Unity is agreeing to come together and to work together.
Right.
Just because we don't like each other doesn't mean that we can't figure out something
Right,
in a
right.
respectful, peaceful manner.
Right.
I don't try to be friends with every person I run into, and that's okay. Some people don't like me, that's okay too. But if I'm stuck on the side of the road and I need assistance from someone, and
Yeah.
maybe there's a lot of differences between us, and
Yeah.
on a normal day we wouldn't interact.
But there's a common humanity.
Yeah,
that,
it's like, but there's
Right.
a common element of humanity where it's like, like it or not, here we are. I will be respectful to you. Please be respectful to me.
Right.
And
And
let's try to move forward.
So getting back to some of your initial statements, was there ever a time where you had a strong sort of either moral, ethical conviction that at a certain point you decided was inadequate for whatever reason? And is that sort of part of what is making up your sort of I don't if I'm putting words in your mouth, tell me, but
You're fine.
ambiguity around firm beliefs?
I think for me, it's what really made me very much the person that I am was a combination of things, like everybody else. I have 5 siblings. I'm one of 6.
Wow.
And we have very different personalities and very different interests. And yet, at the end of the day, we're still family. We might not always like or agree with what people are choosing to do or choosing to be interested in, but you respect it. You're all living under one roof. And you got to sit down and have dinner together or you're just not going to eat. So
Right. So you think having that sort of
So I think growing up in that environment really shapes me to be more pliable and more understanding. On top of that, right out of school, I moved to a completely new state to work in tourism. And I was surrounded by people from completely different walks of life. And again, that really opened my eyes to different religious beliefs, different lifestyle choices. And I saw that for each person, it's what worked for them. And just because I'm not really interested in it, or, I'm not gonna, I think if you want to be a vegan, that's wonderful. It's something I did try, and it didn't work for me.
Right.
But, I was open to trying it. I realized, this isn't really something I can sustain for the rest of my life.
Right. So would you say like that it sounds like your upbringing and having that sort of a lot of people in your immediate family that you had to sort of navigate, negotiate with,
And our parents,
was then confirmed as a good strategy in the world by having been left and gone into a place with a wide variety of people who thought differently
Yeah,
than
my
you.
parents always really stressed a few key things. They sound kind of cheesy, but honesty is the best policy. But being honest doesn't mean being rude. There's a difference between honesty and rudeness.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
it's often difficult to find the line.
Yeah,
But
so
yes, yeah.
there's a way to be honest without being rude, and honesty is always your best policy. You can only control two things: your actions and your reactions.
Mm.
You know, people are gonna do things to you that hurt you or upset you, but you get to choose how you respond.
That's a fascinating one. I love that. I mean, that in today's world, that is a lesson and something that I find people struggle with a lot. In terms of, it's kind of like if your friends all jumped off a bridge, would you do it? Right? So it's
Yeah.
like there's the tendency to want to give responsibility for your actions to somebody else. Like, oh, I was influenced by this and this and this.
Which is funny because that was probably that. Did you grow up in the same town as I did? Because that was another saying that my father used a lot. As soon as you started to make up an excuse, if you got in trouble
Right.
for something, as soon as you're, oh well, I did it because X, Y, and Z. He'd look you straight in the face and say, so if everybody jumped off the
Right.
bridge, you would too.
Right.
And of course, well, no. And it just, again, at a very young age, it taught me to take responsibility, whether I got swept up in it or not. At the end of the day, I decided to go along with it.
Right.
And, it also really showed me that you choose to allow peer pressure. You do make a choice to allow peer pressure to influence you or others to influence you,
Mm-hmm.
and that you don't have to.
Yeah.
You are, it's like they always say the simplest lessons are things you learn when you're young. And it's like, oh, well, if this person doesn't want to be your friend because you don't want to do this, then they're not really your friend.
Yeah. There's that, I think it's a book that says, title is Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten.
Oh, that sounds like a really good book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do feel very strongly that I think perhaps the way I look at things is a little simplistic for some people, but by keeping it simple, or as my mom always liked to say, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. By going with the KISS philosophy, you can take these more complex issues and be a little more open-minded and be a little more willing to try to understand both sides of an argument. And if at the end of the day you side one way or the other, well, that's great. And if at the end of the day you're still undecided, that's okay too.
So it sounds like your parents have instilled some values that have proven themselves out over time. In addition to having to negotiate a bunch of siblings and whatnot, has served you well. Is there a lesson that your parents tried to impart to you that you feel was not helpful?
Oh, I'm sure I could think of some if I really gave it a lot of thought. I guess, well, it wasn't really a lesson, but we grew up in a house where, every Sunday we did go to church.
Mm.
And as I got older, I just decided that wasn't something that was really that important for me to continue to do, and that I could find ways of being satisfied in my daily life and in my faith if I chose to continue it without going to church every Sunday. And the thing was that when I made that decision, I wasn't criticized for it. I wasn't punished for it. It was a decision that I made. Do I still, if I'm back home at Christmas or Easter, do I still attend the service with my family? Absolutely, because it doesn't do me any harm.
Okay.
It's not a painful, hurtful experience.
Yeah.
To go somewhere and hear that some almighty being loves you. You know,
Right.
whether you choose
Sure.
to believe it or not,
Yeah.
it doesn't hurt you to
Right.
go. It's not torture, I promise.
All right.
Yeah, so I don't know. I guess overall, I just feel like if you try to take a deep breath and be willing to listen, but also recognize that not everybody wants to share. And they might feel strongly about something without really knowing why.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't force them to tell you why if they're not really sure. And accepting, again, the whole you can only control your actions and your reactions.
Mm. Do you think it's important for people to want to know true things and not continue under misapprehensions?
I think it's important to be open to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if it's not something that comes to you naturally to think, well, wait a second, is that really true? Then there's nothing wrong with that. However,
Depending on what it is.
but like,
perhaps.
however, if somebody comes to you and says, well, actually, I think you can be informed, instead of being defensive and feeling attacked or belittled, I think it's important to say, oh, well, you know, what makes you say that, or well, what information do you have?
Right.
Use it as a conversation starter, not a stopper.
Right.
And again, you know, being the person who's trying to inform somebody, just always come at it from a place of love. If you have love in your heart and you're coming from a place of true caring for this individual,
Mm-hmm.
it'll be felt. If you're coming at them with aggression or frustration, that'll be felt too.
And you're perhaps much less likely to impart any kind of.
Way less
Yeah.
likely. You know, I mean, even me being as open-minded as I am, if I don't accept people trying to, if anyone comes at me with anger or frustration, you know, I'll usually just tell them, you know, I feel like you've got a lot of passion, and maybe now is not the right time for us to talk about it. You know, I'm like, I want
Do
to
you
give.
distinguish passion from anger and frustration?
I think if you can feel the difference between passion
Right,
and anger
yeah.
and frustration.
So
But
that was-
telling someone who's angry and frustrated that, hey, you're angry and frustrated, and
Right.
that makes me not want to talk to you.
That was your way of.
Well, that's gonna just ramp them up. So saying, hey, I feel like you're
Right,
very
right.
passionate.
So that was your way of being honest but not rude.
Honest but not rude, and also trying very hard to respect that
Yes.
they feel that way for whatever reason. And
Yeah.
even if I don't, I do respect that they feel so strongly.
Right.
Because it must, I mean, you know, it's like I see people all over the place having very strong opinions and emotions, and I think, you know, that's a lot to carry around.
For sure.
It's a lot to carry around.
For sure.
It's a lot to put on your shoulders. And, you know, just more of this, gosh, this is going to be so silly. But just more like stupid sayings that I was taught growing up is catch more flies with honey. You know, it's by, again, just kind of focusing on just being kind, being polite, and trying to find a place of love when you're communicating or being talked to. It's important.
Cool.
And it'll just make the whole thing a lot more civil.
I agree. All right. I feel like that's a good place to wrap up. Great.